Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is another one of those sleepless nights where I have energy to do something, but it's very late at night and it's the end of the weekend, so going out is not an option. And making a video sharing some philosophic ideas is probably the best solution. At this point, I feel like I should probably just name this a series of my sleepless nights. But it is appropriate, especially since we live in a world where that ambience of the philosopher spending time late night in a coffee shop, speaking with his friends, is gone. That we restore that feeling to some extent. So welcome to the video. I hope you can make yourself comfortable if you as you watch this, because you are in the presence of a moment of contemplation at night. You may be watching this in another time of the day, but this is the energy that I'm working in right now. Essentially, a lot of great things begin and end in silence. Before the Big Bang, which is a horrible name for that scientific theory, by the way, uh, we should call it the rapid expansion of the first moment, or something like that. Before that first moment of creation, there was a perennial silence. No sounds were heard. It was simply God. And then he said, be, and it is, right? In the most appropriate way that that applies to his reality. This is important if we want to reflect the feeling and the experience of the initial creative moment, the moment in which the universe begins. uh, we should contemplate silence and then feel how we awaken from that silence. See where we move and in what directions that explosion of meaning uh, is directed to. At the end of the day, the human being does reflect the cosmos. Even the most firm of secularists who will deny uh, spiritual values and symbolic contemplation will have to admit that they themselves have spent the biggest amount of time in scientific research, which is literally the reflection of the cosmos. You could not get any more close to the idea of being at the center of the universe other than studying the whole universe, because you're giving the entire thing rights to dominate your mind, which is what we have to applaud them for. But having said that, to get to the main point, um, it is out of silence that great things emerge. Much of the people of Europe have observed silence as well. Um, the main issue that has to be addressed today, for example, in Europe, is the idea of a Chinese or Japanese takeover, the idea of the Asiatics now ruling over Europe in terms of their mind. I don't think that this will be, in terms of the mind, in any way a defeat, because it is Europe itself which has built the greatest of thinking philosophies, whereas the Asiatics are the ones who have built the greatest of silent philosophies, philosophies which take in silence and then re-emerge into reality with what they have contemplated on from silence. Ideally, you would want the people to join in some kind of common idea throughout the world. If these philosophic traditions and these ideas are so powerful, then they should be, for the sake of divine order in the world, striving to meet each other, even if they're opposite, and especially if they're opposite, they're supposed to meet. Sometimes they're supposed to dominate one another. The European should, to some extent, have such a dignified idea of ruling the entire world. But at the same time, he should know that as he rules, so is he ruled. And this is something that he can know from his own self, by the will of God. At the same time, the Asiatic who wishes to rule can try to rule all over the world and expand into the West and take it over, essentially. But he must also know that the more his silence reemerges in other realities, the more it will have to address its own principles, which requires less silence. So the main point is the more you wish to dominate another society, the more you'll have to be able to take on their value. And you will not succeed at attempting to genocide them, as these threats have emerged between certain nations that are trying to basically play a game in the world that I don't even want to mention. That's how much I don't think that they're worth mentioning. Yeah, basically, whenever you wish to rule and take over some place, you will be counter-ruled, and this has to be acknowledged. Only then will you, in some kind of realistic way, be able to actually establish an expansion and a rule, and you will only be helped by divine providence if you do it in a just way and not a way that kills innocent people. This is important to know. No matter how much greed you have for your pride and for your nation, you have to be able to understand that human virtue is what any society and civilization is built upon. Because if you plan on taking over, then you better take over in a way that individual human beings can at least find themselves in that idea. Ideally, we don't want to have such a world. For example, the Bosnians, my own people, we are in Europe for hundreds of years. Due to our different faith, which is Islam, we have not been acknowledged enough as a European country or a European nation, to be quite honest with you. Not that we have put any effort into that, as much as I think we should be doing. Yeah, essentially, we do have, for example, a proverb which says in our language, caruje, a snaga klade valja, which means, in translation, the mind is what rules the empire, right? The mind is what rules, and it is strength which pushes the logs. Logs meaning logs of wood, right? Nothing special, but humble enough of a proverb to maybe have some effect on somebody from Europe. Your mind is what rules, but your strength is what pushes forward. You have to actually accumulate strength if you want to push forward. So it's actually a good thing that the world has revived the idea of a dominance, the idea of a competition. This enables the betterment of societies. It is unfortunately currently springing in all places of the world as a type of fascism, which has to be stopped. But it is reasonable that this was the response that we have. Unfortunately, the only way that this was possible to accomplish is by giving people the most controversial and semi-intelligent rulers, essentially. But behind that project, there are many very, very intelligent men who might not have the best intentions about the world. Now, having said that, when you bring that into awareness, it is enough of a tool for you to understand that if you manage to govern your own self the way that many people attempt to govern the whole world, you will prevent any type of force into what you're supposed to think, feel, and do. When you understand that you can actually rule the world transparently as an individual, as long as you rule yourself, then you will succeed. Because your rule becomes focused around supporting the individual human being and not just an idea. So whatever blend of virtue that you take and a desire to seek out, go out and dominate, I will tell you this, I will not stop you in that. I might even support you in the idea, but know that you will be faced with trial. Know that you will be faced with difficulty, and know that you cannot justify your crimes based upon your struggle in that difficulty and saying that you're a great nation that strives, or that you can say that your morality is better than another person's morality. Morality is simply an iteration in different ways. You can argue that your political system or your religion or your ideas or your lack of any of that is better, but you can't argue that one morality is better than another. Morality is a universal human reality, and people have a right to experiment with different types and modes and approaches to morality. So if your desire is to get rid of a global community, which is where the world is heading now, go for it, but enable an inward integration of human value. Enable so that people, if they do actually differ and seek out some kind of purification, not through genocide, but through mental distance from each other, then enable them at least to benefit from one another and translate each other's virtue systems. In other words, if a European person is in love with Japan, let them take from Japan what they can and translate that into Europe. They don't have to be Japanese, they don't have to look Japanese, they don't have to mix it up with Japanese culture, they don't have to put on a kimono, they don't have to look like the Buddha in order for them to meditate like this. Right? It's not that difficult. Likewise, a person from Japan doesn't need to wear modern clothing if they wish to know about philosophy, if they wish to know about our thinkers, Albert Camus, Nietzsche, if they want to just watch our series, if they want to have our politics, the right and the left, right, liberals and conservatives, all that kind of stuff, they can still wear their traditional Japanese clothes. The one injustice that the West has made is that they have made human clothing a monoculture, right? Which is what we suffer, right? It's a simple, plain type of clothing which does not show any type of blessing or energy of or an idea of union with nature, and it has imposed itself as the only standard for styles. I'd prefer to see a Japanese lady in a kimono before I prefer to see her in a miniskirt. I'm not going to attack her if she does that. I'm not especially going to attack a European girl because this comes from her culture, right? Because it is the European culture that liberates, that gives the women their rights, and that tells people that they need to respect their individual self. This was necessary because Europeans live in that kind of geography. So understand before you conquer. As you conquer now one another and dominate over each other with your cultures and your ideas, try to still understand each other. This is one way about going in terms of going about things. It is a combination of a former world which has escaped fascism and a new world which is mistakenly going towards fascism but could be going towards a more proper moderate tradition, a centrist tradition. Centrism is one political power that has never actually managed to establish itself, unfortunately. The only way that centrism thrived is by mixing with the right or the left. You had right centrists and left centrists, which is okay, because if all of us said, okay, we're centrists and we have a centrist party, people's centers are different, right? A secular centrist will want to enable religious people to speak about all of their faiths without compromising any of the secular values. They want them to be transparent, they want them to interact, but they don't want secular values to go. A religious person who is a centrist, like myself, will want religion to be the standard, but they will want also to allow for non-religious people to speak up and express themselves and criticize, right? But that center is never really ideal. The real center would be a complete balance, which would be resulting in a good rule, I think, in a very human rule, but it would reduce all of that kind of dominance and conquest and defeat and all of that dichotomy of fall and rise and, understanding your place and all of that kind of stuff. In centrism, everyone would have their place. Everyone would have enough and nobody would have to complain. And because nobody would have to complain, that would result in complaining. All of this, to some extent, can be a little bit of a game. But it is important to understand that these are different modes by which you are ruled. The ideal person shouldn't be saying, that they are stuck in a certain party for a long period of time. They should simply say that what is their temperament is what's going to define their politics. Because I have a theory personally, and this is what I offer to the whole world, the idea or the theory that nations are defined by temperament. And I spoke about this in a previous video, but let me explain this in more detail. A person who likes more meditative, calm, unexciting, continuous lifestyle will most likely like the Asiatics more. They will most likely like the Indians, the Japanese, the Chinese, and they're gonna sometimes even unconsciously, because of that need, give everything in their life for that rule to establish itself. But see, if they made that conscious, they would ask themselves, can I bring that virtue into my own society without becoming Chinese, without becoming Japanese? Likewise, in the other direction, uh, somebody from the Asiatics might think of Rome, of Europe, right? In a certain way where they would want that to conquer them, right? They love to bring that over there to Japan, so they wear modern clothing. They speak about rights and issues and freedoms and all of these kind of things. So yeah, they can do that without compromising on their culture. That's what I'm trying to say. And this is, for example, something that people have not tried yet. This is some kind of system that humanity has not attempted, which is not that of fascism and not that of complete globalism of mixing cultures, but that of understanding your own culture well, and then by your own culture, ruling others by letting them rule you from within. Let me repeat that. You understand your own culture to such an extent that you rule them enough to allow them to rule you from within. So they don't give you Japanese clothing or Pakistani clothing or Arab clothing or Turkish clothing, but you carry that virtue that they have, which you like. Likewise, you don't wear Western clothing. You don't have a Western hairstyle, or have a T-shirt that says Pink Floyd or whatever, but you like that and you incorporate it into your own culture. What I'm saying is humanity hasn't actually experienced taking in an opposite value and letting it properly take on the color of another culture, right? And a symbolism. It's easy to combine things, but it's very hard to translate them sometimes. So, translation of empire, that was an old principle in Europe. Anybody that knows European history well will know that the French took the Roman Empire by translation, translatio imperii, which is the term in Latin, and made themselves the inheritors of Rome, the French. And then the French gave it to the Hohenstaufen family of Germany, who then translated their heritage into a German, Frankish German, and German in the end inheritance of the Roman Empire. So that's something in which that's a way in which a European can contribute to the world's thinking systems. But at the end of the day, people are just playing with these things. What will be important is to realize that reality is manifest through nature as well, and that nature speaks to us, and that there is a true call to our own purpose when we heed to the voice which is in nature. Not a literal voice necessarily, but the sense for all things around us emanating themselves into us. When we realize that the sun enters us, and that the moon enters us, and that the trees enter us, and that the stars enter us, and that the earth and heaven meet in us. We are not necessarily the center, but we are that kind of gravity point where the natural world can get its truth and its purpose spoken, right? You're the one that can actually say how a tree could feel. You're the one that can give the material world its sentient interpretation. So that is your task as a human being, to maintain properly in your mind and your heart, before anything else, the cultivation of the heavens and the earth. The stars will speak to you, but they will speak to you in the sense that when you look at them, you see that there is a protrudence of light moving to you. And so in a sense, something is moving to you. It might be moving in different directions, truly. But if your experience of it is phenomenologically, as a phenomena, such that it pierces into you, then take that seriously. That's a sign from God that you're able to study that star, that that star is calling you to study it. That the tree, when it breathes and it gives you air so you can breathe, and then speak all your words, understand that the tree is looking for you to take care of it. And that the earth which holds you, also, when you tread on it, responds with every time you make a footstep upon it, it echoes with a desire for you to use it for something that is good. Awareness of the natural world and depth of perception is what is needed in today's society before anything else, before any kind of ideology. This is because the times of the one-eyed Antichrist are approaching us. And we have to fight that metaphysical idea of one-eyedness, right, which will emerge in the people of the Antichrist by depth perception. So it's not that he's just one-eyed literally. There's a lot of people who are good human beings that have lost an eye. That doesn't matter. That's not the main point. That's just an outward sign. The main point is that he sees with only one perception, with one perspective, with one politics, with one ideology. He never emerges away from that. He keeps people stuck in that false paradise, which is truly a hell of ideology, right? Of ideology spreading, and if you don't spread your ideology, that you will fail. An ideology that sees movement can be useful and can be good, but only when that movement is rooted in reality. However, most ideologies in the world and movements have not seen reality for what it is. So that is important. It is important to see reality, to have depth of perception as we move into the future of the human condition. So we have to do that. Yeah. I think that's enough. Have a good one, folks, and take care. Bye.